Hello, and welcome to this, the Savage Balance Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode number 21 of the Savage Balance Podcast. How are you all doing? I hope you're doing well. I hope you're doing okay. And if you're not doing okay, that's okay too. At least it can be okay, as long as you're not resisting against it. In fact, this is some of the stuff I'm going to talk about in this week's episode. Maybe you're feeling stressed, maybe you're feeling depressed, maybe you're feeling a bit overwhelmed or overrun. There's been a lot going on for a lot of people, haven't there? There's been a ton of stuff globally, nationally, personally for a lot of people. We're all experiencing a lot of things. And maybe our resilience isn't as high. I know mine hasn't been. I felt mine sort of ebb away slowly over the past year. A lot of the practices that I had and I was doing are slowly becoming more and more on the back heel, and I feel like more I've just been trying to get by as opposed to sort of thriving. I'm slowly trying to put those things back into place, but it's difficult, and it's a difficult time to do so, especially when it still feels like every day is kind of just letting things or just reacting to things in the moment, and I don't really feel like I'm stepping too many days ahead of myself. In fact, shopping is a good example. Before, I had a good idea of what shopping was going in and what was coming out, and now I feel like I'm living sort of day to day, piecing bits together here and there, and I'm a lot less on top of my shopping habits and stuff like that. And I think this is something maybe we're all experiencing different variations and versions of to different degrees over the past year. And maybe our resilience is down. And, this is going to be a kind of two-parter in a sense. Two parts within one episode, because I'm going to be talking for a little bit, first of all, about how to access resilience when things are a struggle and when things are quite hard and when you don't feel you can access it immediately. And then afterwards, we're going to have a fantastic conversation. Well, it was more of an interview from a while ago, but with a very inspirational endurance runner who I got to talk to a couple of years ago. And let's see if there's something in all of this to help us all stay a bit stronger for the time being. How's that sound? Does that sound good? Does that sound like a right barrel of bloody well good laughs? I hope so. Let's talk about it. Let's just jump straight in. If you're feeling overwhelmed in some way, if you're feeling stressed out, if you're feeling some difficult things, and you feel like your resilience is down, and you feel like I can't sort of cope in this moment, and things are getting overrun, and and your mindset is changing within that, here's a few tips for potentially things that could help out along the way. First of all, it's always worth doing. It's always a great way to start, I believe. Just taking a few nice, long, deep breaths. Very slow, very deliberate. Concentrating on the breath in and out. Slow, deep breathing changes your body physiologically. When we are stressed, we are breathing sort of quite shallow, and we are breathing fast and sort of more from more higher up, but a deeper, slower, more concentrated breath sends the message to the brain that it can relax and that it can, it can calm down at the moment. The adrenaline is starting to go into overdrive, and those slow, concentrated breaths can bring down your body's physiological response to stress. So that's a great place to start. Just a couple of breaths, concentrating on the breath in and on the breath out. Nice and deep, nice and slow. It's not necessarily a cure, and it's not necessarily even, going to fix thoughts, and it might not even, change your mood too much, but what it will do is give you a good grounding to build upon, to start moving onwards from. So taking a couple of deep breaths is a very good one. Understanding what you're feeling as well is my second bit of advice. Understanding what feelings are coming up and how they're coming up. And I think that can be a lot harder than we give it credit for. Sometimes we get a wave of sadness, but other times it doesn't really feel like sadness. Or other times it does feel like sadness, but it feels different. It's a different kind of sadness. Or sometimes we feel happy. But again, there's different types of happy and we're not too sure. Or frustrated and angry and we can't quite articulate it. There is a really good technique that's called RAIN, which I first learnt about from meditation teacher Sharon Salzberg, but Tara Brach does some wonderful stuff as well. And there's a link in the show notes to a kind of a RAIN. It's a meditation, but it's not a meditation in the sense that some people may be thinking of meditation as in sitting there concentrating on the breath, a lot of people think meditation is trying to stop the thoughts, and that is not true about meditation. You can't stop the thoughts, and that sounds like a lot of tension in there. The idea is to bring the attention back to the breath from the thoughts. So when the thought comes up and we attach to that thought, we hear the thought and then we react to the thought, recognizing in that moment that we have been distracted and then bringing the attention back to the breath. There's lots of different types of meditation that do different things, but this is the way I understand it best, which is to just bring the attention back to the breath. And it is that moment of bringing the attention back that is where the transformative action is taking place. It is not so much the moments where you are concentrating on the breath. It's the moments when you are distracted and you recognize it, and then you bring it back to the breath. That is where it happens. And so, in fact, in a way, the more distracted you get during meditation, when people say, I can't meditate, my brain is too fast and too much stuff is going on, that sounds like a great brain to meditate with, because that is ample opportunities to keep bringing that attention back to the breath. And then when it gets distracted again, a moment later, just taking a moment and bringing it back to the breath again, and letting the thoughts come and go. But anyway, it's not a meditation in that sense. It's quite, I'd say, active in terms of creating space for things, but there's a lot of steps going through it. So I would definitely recommend trying it out. Anyway, I haven't explained what it is, have I? RAIN is an acronym, and it stands for Recognize, Allow, Investigate, and Nurture. So I'll do a rough run through about what that is, although it's quite self-explanatory within the technique itself from Tara Brach if you click on the link. But first of all, recognizing that you are feeling this way, that this feeling is happening right now. So I guess that's sort of awareness and bringing yourself into the present moment. So, for example, in terms of this idea of resilience, I'm feeling frustrated and I can't fight back. I'm just feeling overwhelmed and I'm feeling stressed and I'm feeling angry and all of these things. Take a moment. Recognize that you are feeling these things right now. Take a moment to recognize what you are feeling. Allow these feelings to be there. Do not resist against them. Do not try to change them or manipulate them in any way. Simply let them be there as much as possible. If you're feeling anger, sit in the body and just experience that anger. Let that anger be there and don't try to resist against it. Don't try to change it. Don't think I shouldn't be angry right now. I'll try to change the anger, or I feel guilty for the anger. Just let the anger be there. So recognize it's there, allow it to be there. And then investigate. Sit with that feeling and really understand what it is that you are feeling. Because the times when I have done this, if I'm, say, feeling angry, for example, the times when I've sat there and recognized and concentrated on the way I'm feeling, that anger is often, a multitude of different things. There might be a little bit of shame going on in there, a little bit of jealousy. There might be, upset, like deep discomfort. It might be physical pain that I am in, and that is translating to the way I'm reacting to the world. There might be some sadness in there as well. There might be a general sadness or a depression. I might be feeling anxious, and I don't want to be feeling anxious, so there is a resistance to the anxiousness. I might be feeling embarrassed. I might be feeling, just overwhelmed. I might be feeling stressed. And the more you can understand and clearly define the different feelings that make up what you are feeling, the more you can understand where it is you're coming from. Because usually, sometimes I have been angry, like in an argument or something. I do this and then I'm feeling angry, and then I realize, actually, the anger is masking embarrassment because of what I said. I said something that I'm not proud of, that I feel shame for, and I'm embarrassed I said it. And because I'm feeling that, I'm feeling defensive. And then, so you do, yes, R, recognize, A, allow, I, investigate, and then N, nurture. Just, it's okay that you're feeling those things. It's okay. Let them be there. Let them be there. Let yourself experience the full range of human emotion. And if this is the feeling that's coming up at the moment, nurture it. Let it be there. It's okay. It's okay. It's there for a reason. It's there to teach you a lesson. It's there to tell you something. Tara Brach does that a lot better anyway, but that is the general an acronym of RAIN: recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. And so this gives you, a pathway back to presence and intelligence and creativity, and a pathway back to your heart and how you're feeling. It's a technique worth undertaking, because the better you understand how you're feeling, the more you can know what you are being resilient against, and you have the best tools at your disposal to really work with it. So the third bit of advice I would give, and it ties in a lot to what's being talked about later on in the conversation that's coming up, is to reconnect to your values, having a clear understanding of your path and of your purpose and of your motivations and intentions. That can be really useful. In fact, there is a good tool that you can do. In fact, right after RAIN, right after you've done that, you can, especially if you do this in the morning or practice in the morning. In fact, even beyond that, just at any point, you can take a moment, do a couple of deep breaths, and think about motivation and intention setting for the day. What mood am I in, and how will I best be of service to myself and of others? How can I help people as best I can? How can I be the kindest version of myself that I can be? All of these sorts of thoughts. If you set yourself that intention, which I used to do, and then I would write it actually on my hand, and then I would physically have something to return to when something went awry, if I had too much work going on, or if I was late for something, or if I broke something at the wrong time, I would have this to return to. And they would often be things like kindness or patience or stillness sometimes. Sometimes I'd write breath. Sometimes it would be more specific, like I'll make sure I say hello to the people in the morning, or smile at more people and let that respond, or, intention of being out in nature today. If you have something written down that you can relate to, that can really help anchor yourself in with that purpose and motivation, and give you something to reconnect to in a day where maybe that resilience is down. I'm not feeling up to it today. I'm not feeling right. Just glance at your hand if you've written it on, maybe on your phone, or on a notepad nearby, or if you're at home a lot, as we are at the moment, maybe write it on a fridge or on a post-it note somewhere. Something physical that you can see, that you can return to, and then you can see kindness. And so you're thinking, I've had argument with my husband, or with my wife, or with my partner, and I'm feeling frustrated. And you see that note, and you see it says kindness, because you've set yourself that intention for kindness that day. Even if you feel like, I've got something to say in this argument, okay, kindness is the thing I want to do. How can I best bring kindness to this situation so I can be best for myself and best for this other person? I found that really useful, and I think I might reintroduce that back into my life, because it really was important. And the fourth piece of advice I think I would give is to try and have a good understanding of what your outlook is. Are you coming from, in a very broad sense, are you coming from a kind of victim mentality or survivor mentality? And again, there's some very interesting stuff in the show notes. I would definitely recommend, maybe more than other episodes, going down and checking them out, because there's some good stuff in there. And there's a little article about victim mentality versus survivor mentality. The basic idea, I guess, is victim mentality is the idea that things are being done to you, and survivor mentality is sort of things being done. In fact, I tell you what, Karamo sums it up best, which is something he mentioned in an interview with Rich Roll. Link in the show notes. It is there. About 24 minutes in, he starts talking. He says when he talks to people with the sort of care work that he used to do, he would tell the kids and the children in those environments that every situation you've been in didn't happen to you, it happened for you. And I think that's a good way of approaching victim versus survivor mentality. If I guess a victim would see things happening to them, and a survivor would see things happening for them. He's saying, yes, you had an experience that was traumatic, but what can you learn from this experience? How can you grow from it? How can you start to heal from that experience? And, it's that growth in which the transformation happens. These things happened to me so I could be stronger, so I could love myself. These are the things that he says. Having something to resist against is what increases our strength in the first place. A good example of this is literally exercise or lifting weights. If you want to gain mass, you have to, if you're lifting up a dumbbell or a weight, I suddenly felt out of my depth. Like me saying dumbbell, people will go, you saying dumbbell? You think you know what a dumbbell is? Look at you skinny little piece of, I've seen you, and you are not somebody who's ever been near a dumbbell. Well, I'll tell you this, I have been near a dumbbell. In fact, I used to own a pair, a good 9 years ago, and I would lift them sometimes quite high, really high, sometimes, in line with my head, a couple of times above my head, right up in the air. And it was heavy. They were, they were weights, they were dumbbells. So don't be so patronizing, please. But it's a good example of this sort of thing that we're talking about, because you have to lift it. You're actually creating lots of little tears in your muscle. And then you have to have the rest period in which the muscle grows back over, and it grows back stronger than it was before. So it's having something to resist against, i.e. the sort of dumbbell or the situation that you have been put in, is a way of increasing your strength. If you're put in a bad situation or a traumatic situation, there is potential that is something to resist against, and that can increase your strength in a way like that. If you understand what I'm saying, I remember hearing somebody in a podcast somewhere saying that if you're with someone who is struggling, if you think about yourself and how important your journey has been for you, and each step of that journey has been for you, would you want to take that journey away from somebody else? And I think I wouldn't want to take that away from somebody else. I think the strain and the struggles that I've been through have helped develop me into the person that I am. So I wouldn't want to take that away from somebody else, and I wouldn't want somebody else to take that away from me. And I think a good way of illustrating sort of victim versus survivor mentality is a really great story I heard on another podcast, where somebody was saying about, it was the example they gave of two soldiers who had both had their legs blown off in a war. And if you walk past one door, you would see somebody there and they would be cursing God and saying, why has this happened to me? I've lost my legs and my life is over. I'll never walk again. My career is done. My life is done. I'm like, this is the end of me. This is the breaking of me. And I don't understand why this has happened to me. And then you walk to the second door and you see the person there in the same situation, and they're thanking God and they're saying, thank you, God, I'm still alive. I'm still here. Now I understand the preciousness of life. And even though I have lost these legs, I'm still here with heart and mind and soul, and I can be there with my children and with my partner. And it's given me a new lease of life. Like maybe I was getting a bit too distant from it all, but now I'm here, and I I still have time, and that is wonderful. And I think we would listen to those two examples and we think neither of them is wrong, or neither of them, they're both right in their own way. But they clearly, one of them is increasing suffering, and the other one has that survival mentality and that resistance and that resilience to keep enjoying life and to get as much out of life as possible. And you get a sense that if you picture those two people 5 years down the line, who would be having the happier life, who would have had the happier experiences, who would be the more resilient, in a sense, I find that a very powerful metaphor, really. So understanding your outlook, I think, is quite key, and seeing if you can shift it from being one less a victim and more of a survivor. I think that's really key, because then when things happen, and as Karamo says, when things don't happen to you, they happen for you. When you can reframe it in that way, I've had another friend of mine saying that the universe is always sending you sort of moments and sort of challenges, and is trying to guide you on a certain path. So it will keep sending you these messages until you start to take notice of them. I can't remember the actual, there's an actual phrase that he uses. I can't quite remember what it is. Yes, there we go. I remember. He says that everything is either a blessing or a teaching. And if it is a teaching, then eventually it will become a blessing. And that is, one version of a philosophical outlook to have, which can keep you resilient in times of hardship. And I really like that anyway. And my last bit of advice within this sort of realm of small bits of advice is the idea that it's a process and it's a practice that you keep returning to. Don't expect that one day, because you have that resilience, the next day it will necessarily be there. But that's part of what resilience is, isn't it? It's about being able to pick yourself back up when you fall down. And we are all going to, in various different degrees and to varying different stories, various different levels of pain, we're all going to be kicked down at certain points. And it is the way in which we can pull ourselves back up time and time again as much as we can. See it as a process, see it as a practice to keep pulling yourself up for. That is where the strength is. Again, I like the metaphor with meditation, not the metaphor, but the idea of meditation, that it's not the concentrating on the breath, i.e. is not the point, when you're reaching enlightenment or everything is going smoothly and swimmingly. It is that moment when you get distracted, so i.e. the bad moment happens, you are taken away and you're in that place. And the moment, the key transitional moment is when you bring the attention back to the breath, as in when you pick yourself up off of the floor. It is that moment of like achieving that resilience, or that moment, or that recognition of change, which is the real, true moment, a powerful moment of change, really. So I'll just briefly list them all again, just as a handy little help. Maybe none of these helped, maybe some of these helped. If they do help, maybe you can bring one into your life in some way. It might be worth trying it out a few times and seeing how it works for you. So first one, take a few deep breaths. Second one, understanding what you're feeling. Again, you can do that RAIN practice. The link is in the show notes. Understand what perspective you're coming from with certain things, and reconnecting with your values, and, remembering it's a process, it's a practice, so keep returning to it. Anyway, if you want some more kind of inspirational talks, then let me introduce you to a name that many of you will probably not need introducing to. This is a conversation I had with Fiona Oakes. Fiona Oakes has made a name for herself as a phenomenally dedicated endurance runner, having set 3 world records, including becoming the fastest woman in the world to run a marathon on all 7 continents and the North Pole. Fiona has competed internationally in more than 50 marathons and set 5 marathon course records around the globe. And in 2015, Fiona ran 6 official marathons in 6 days on 6 different continents, which is staggering. This is all in spite of being told at the age of 14 that she would never walk again properly because of problems with her knees. Anyway, she is the focus of an all-inspiring documentary called Running for Good, which is why I won't go into too much of her life story because it's all shown beautifully on there. And I'd say it's a must-watch for anyone out there looking for some inspiration and some motivation and looking to try and understand and build up that resilience. You know, with her overcoming her own adversity, Fiona's true drive is to... Well, I mean, the reason a lot of this is where she comes from is because of her sanctuary, really. She's got a sanctuary called Tower Hill Stables. And I think I will take a moment, really, to make a little impassioned plea for you to support that. There is a link directly in the show notes, like right at the top, for Tower Hill Stables. And they're really just a sanctuary that have about 600 animals, whether they be retired racehorses or ex-fighting dogs or neglected and abused farm animals. And they're all just looked after and given love and respect, medical care, led to lead a peaceful life. And if you hear her talking about her animals that she cares for, it's a real, she talks about it being a real privilege, and it's just sounds really beautiful for those lives of those animals. And of course, COVID has hit almost everyone in the same kind of financial way. And there's lots of places you can leave your money, but I would make an impassioned plea to consider Tower Hill Stables, give them some money, help them look after these animals who have had really difficult, horrible, tragic lives. And I think it's a great thing to support. But anyway, Fiona is really, I think, a true example of someone who has managed to truly understand, recontextualize, and manifest their pain and suffering into something, truly positive, a truly positive change for the world and within herself. And I think that you will really love this. I'm not going to be back at the end of this. I'm going to play the interview and go out. So I will briefly now say thank you very much for listening. And if you could share this with your friends, that would be great. Share this with anyone who might need support or guidance or, a bit of ideas of where to get resilience from at this time in our lives. That would be great, especially for the people who listen. If you could tell somebody about it, I would massively appreciate it. We have a social media. We have an Instagram, Savage Balance Podcast. You can email me at savbalpod@gmail.com if you have any further questions or thoughts about this or any extra guidance. I'm not very good with guidance, but I'll do my best. I've got some thoughts, that's for sure. There's a website as well. And if you could subscribe, comment, rate and review, that would be great. The artwork is by Dolly Gray and the music is by Danny Tonks. Thank you very much for listening and hopefully continuing to listen to this really wonderful, inspiring, beautiful chat. This was recorded sort of October 2019, so it was recorded quite a while back to do with a radio show that I work on still now called Future Vegan. So there's a vegan element to the questions, but there is a lot of inspiration and there is a lot of resilience that you can get from this. So without any further waffling, thank you very much for listening. Do enjoy this conversation with Fiona Oakes, and I'll see you next week.
And you?
I think I've heard it said before that freedom isn't freedom to fulfill our desires. Freedom is freedom from our desires. Like all these things that we think we want and we need.
Yeah.
The more you take them away, the more you realise
how the more liberated and happy you feel.
Yeah.
You do. And that is the absolute truth. That is the message that it is the essence of how to save the world. It is the essence of how to be happier. But unfortunately, we live in a world where we are told that you can buy happiness.
Yes.
Money is God in our world. And when we're talking about them races like Marathon Sable and that, I've been frightened in that race. I haven't got enough, literally frightened about water. I'm frightened I'm going to keel over. I haven't got enough water.
Yeah.
You realise, I'm not saying I haven't got Perrier water. I'm saying I haven't got any water. It doesn't need to be flavoured with lime to get it down. It needs to be fluid, any sort of fluid, and I'll drink it. And that is what people need to be understanding that we could come to a point, if we carry on in the model we're using, we're going to end up in that situation where if there is, I say, what would happen if there was one of these major disasters, for instance, you know, climate disasters, and you couldn't claim on insurance, your house had gone, and that was it. Think in terms of there being no insurance there. The planet has not got an insurance policy.
Yeah.
That's what. Do you know what I mean? And it does scare me. It scares me the direction that the world is going. I hope it's recoverable. It's growing and the movement is growing, and I hope that all movements are growing. People are becoming aware, but I just hope they're not becoming aware too late.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah. Because for young people like yourself, it is kind of frightening, because what my expectations were when they were your age, I don't mean expectations in terms of material things, I meant in environmental security, are not the same for you as they were for me. It's not just, and it's almost the same difference that in a few years, the environment has taken the same route as I mentioned in that talk, that I bought a house back in the mid-90s as a single girl on a secretary's salary. That would be absolutely unachievable now. And it was in London, in reach of London. What I bought for £64,000 now fetches £350,000.
Yeah.
And the gap has gone massive between it being able to reach, and it's gone the same with the environment and our expectations for the future. It's scary.
Yeah, well, we've been priced out of, me and my partner have been priced out of London and then Brighton just through not being able to afford rent anymore.
Rent, yeah. And the worst of it is you're paying rent, but you've got nothing at the end of it.
Yeah.
You know,
And
and I
just
think,
goes-
and I've got a problem, my mum's got a problem with older people, the older generation, who, she says herself, we bought, we didn't buy because we were sort of great projectors of the future, we bought because we were able to buy, and it was put at us that it's something you can afford to do, you can have pride in your property. She didn't realise that they were paying basically into a giant savings plan for the future, whilst living in it at the time for free, if you get my drift.
Yeah.
And she feels that older people should say, not be so greedy and grasping, and, you know, I paid $2,000 for it in 1960, it's got to be worth $850 now. You know, it's not. It's not fair. It's not fair on the younger generation to do that. You've got to put yourself in their position now. But it's difficult. People find it very, very difficult to see anybody else's point of view but their own.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's why it's even harder to get them to see the point of the animals, which they refuse to see, especially those that have been farmed. But
the other people are already once removed, and then there's other people beyond that have removed again, so get into a different species for some reason is...
Yeah, speciesism, racism, sexism, it's all got to go. We've got to be equal, and it's a very, very... very, very difficult and tricky message to get across convincingly and make people believe it and want it.
Yeah.
Because everything in society is geared around looks, money, and material possessions. You're measured by those things. Oh, and how many followers you've got. Yeah.
Facebook looking into actually doing their own currency as well, aren't they?
Really?
So, Facebook and Google.
Really?
That's your own physical currency within.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's frightening. It's scary. But, you know, we are where we are. We've got to work for it. I mean, I actually said to Keegan, do you think it's too late, when we were having a deep-seated conversation in the Sahara Desert one evening? And he said, yeah, probably it's too late. But that doesn't mean to say that I'm going to sit back and allow it to happen. I'm going to fight. Because I don't want to be one of those people. I mean, you know, you do look back and I haven't got children, so I won't have grandchildren, but I've got a niece. And you feel like she will say to you, Auntie Fiona, didn't you do anything? You saw it happening and you didn't do anything. I did. I've tried everything, you know, along the way, and I will continue to do so. But it's a massive force. It's like pushing the tide back. You feel like King Canute sometimes, sitting there thinking, no. And especially the most powerful thing you can have now is a voice. And as I say, influence is a great thing, but it can also be a bad thing. There can be bad influence as well as good influence. Yeah. And I just hope that a lot of the influencers out there are aware of that.
I hope so too, yeah.
Yeah.
What inspires you to keep working at this rate that you do?
Animals. helping animals. That's been the core of my veganism, my life, all my life. I became vegan because of the animals, and it wasn't. I didn't make a decision. It was a reaction against the abhorrence of harming any creature. I mean, it wouldn't occur to me to go and punch my mum, and it wouldn't occur to me to harm an animal in the same way I see them as my family. And it is, as I say, I didn't make a decision at 6 years old because I think you're too young. It was a reaction against the violence towards any living creature. I didn't want any part of it.
Definitely, yeah. So with I watched Running for Good last night. One of the bits that I remember when you were talking about the knee injury, I wrote it down so I don't forget what it said. But you said it's made me the person I am. So I got to thinking about the relationship between sort of pain and compassion and stuff. So I was wondering, do you have any insight as to how you access that mental strength that seems to be the driving force of everything you do?
I don't know. With my running, it's just like it's just a simple application to what I'm doing in terms of I'm not the person that walks up to the start line to do a race. I am on the start line and during the race, and then the old Fiona comes back. It is always core and fundamental to me that the more it hurts, the more others are hurting out there. And so I can push myself just to get myself. I always think that with the long training runs that I do, it's a time that I use to think. Obviously, I think when I'm out there, but I like to suffer when I'm running. I like to make myself suffer because it teaches me a lot about myself and a lot about what it must be like to be in that position. And for what I particularly, if you like, enjoy about the multi-stage races is you have to carry everything about your person for the whole week. So you are totally self-sufficient apart from a very limited water supply for the whole week. So you actually start to think about things which you take for granted when you're back here.
Teaches you what you need.
Yeah. I mean, I've always joked and I said, in Marathon de Sable, I've been sometimes, if somebody had offered me a giant diamond when I'm out there, I'd have said, how heavy is it? And if it's 1 million carats, no, I don't want it, it's too heavy, I can't carry it. Or, if somebody offered you a €500 note, if they exist, I'd probably look at it and think, might do as toilet paper. You know what I mean? He teaches you. And also, water is such a precious commodity, and we take for granted the fact that when we turn a tap on in this country, this beautiful substance, not Perrier or orange tinted flavoured, just this pure water or whatever's in it, but this fluid comes out that we can drink. We take those things for granted, and these are the most important things in life, because if you just strip down, animals and humans are very similar. Water, food and shelter. And after that, how do you want to live your life? I want to live it without fear and without pain and with freedom. And then that's what I try to provide at the sanctuary, because they are the most important things. So when I'm out there punishing myself and whatever I'm doing, I always hold back, and I'm very reticent to say I am suffering, and I do push myself very, very, very hard. But at the end of the day, at any moment, I can stop. I can put my hand up if I'm in a race and say, actually, I want to go home now, or they can't. That's their life. They're being tortured, and the only release from that torture is death. That's what honestly drives me. I'm constantly thinking about that in the back of my mind. And the harder it gets, the more I think about it. And more aware. I don't go around all day thinking about it, when I'm doing mundane jobs. But when I'm in an extreme position, I try to put myself in the position of an animal or a person that's in a much more extreme position. And it allows you to overcome this little bit of suffering to push yourself that bit harder.
Right, yeah. I remember Rich Roll talking about that, the idea of the pain being the teacher.
Yeah.
Get to a point where the pain will teach you what you need to know.
Yeah. And teaches you an awful lot about yourself as well.
Yes, yeah definitely.
Yeah.
Could you say a bit about your vegan story? So you've been vegan 45 years.
Yeah, I've been vegan for 45 years. I went vegan when I was 6 years old. Previous to that, I'd gone vegetarian at 3 years old. I jokingly say I don't come from some bohemian background where it was encouraged. My parents were both carnivores. My mum was a nurse, very working class, so that actually addresses the issue of vegan privilege. I literally had a very, very basic vegan diet, which I still have today. I don't think I'd want it any other way. I don't buy any of the enhanced products because I've never had them. I don't miss them, but I do see they have a place. After that, it's a pretty normal childhood. I did have a severe problem with my knees and nothing to do with being vegan when I was a teenager, and I had to have my right kneecap removed, which made life very, very difficult for me. Multiple surgeries in and out of hospital. It was a big impact because I was very, very sporty. Then I came to work in London. I managed to fulfil my dream of having an animal sanctuary. And after that, I desperately took about the task of promoting veganism in a positive way, because actually being on the ground, caring for animals and rescuing, you realise you can't rescue them all. So let's look at why they need rescuing. Let's look at the meat and dairy industry. So let's go out and do something positive. I was sporty. I probably wouldn't have initially thought of marathon running, but for the fact that Paula Radcliffe was doing well in the event and interest was there in the country in this event. So I thought, well, if I could get round a marathon, complete one, it proves that as a vegan woman, you can do anything. And I think people have got to understand how long I've been doing this. So I started marathon running in the early noughties. At that time, marathons had only been accessible to women in the Olympics for 16 years. The first women's marathon was in 1984, so it was considered a really, really challenging event for a woman to be tackling. So that logic was, vegan woman can complete a marathon, vegan woman can do anything. Simple. And I've just taken it on from there. I've broken world records. I don't quite know how I've done it. Obviously, I've done it by running, but it's the mental drive, and I think that's an important thing with sport. It's not just about physical ability, it's about mental ability to push yourself. And there's no doubt about it. There are doctors, I get doctors writing to me and say, I'm really, really inspired by your story. I've got patients who have these severe problems, and to think of you running marathons, certainly at the pace you do, with no kneecap, makes me cringe. And doctors have actually written that to me. But it is this mental ability to block the pain and do it, know that you are doing it for a reason. I certainly don't run for trophies and medals and certificates and times. I run with this belief that I'm helping others, which I think you'd probably... I'm one of those people that I'd rather suffer myself than watch someone or something else suffer. And I think that is the kind of person I am, that's what allows me to push myself that bit harder. And the reason I'm doing it, the reason I'm doing it is and that sport, the mental side of sport is very, very important. I have no talent, but I do have a mental fortitude second to none, the discipline to go out there and do it. If I had talent with that kind of discipline, I'd be at the top, that very, very top. There's no doubt about it. I don't have any talent. But it just shows what you can do with mental discipline and a reason. And I've certainly got a big enough reason. So that's about me.
Purpose, natural reason to keep going.
Yeah.
So given those things, how do you feel about the sudden recent explosion sort of in veganism in recent years?
I think it's got to be good. I come from a time when literally it's not that long ago, if you went into a cafe and asked for soya milk even, you get the kind of quizzical look. You might get offered semi-skimmed if you were lucky, or you might get thrown out if you were unlucky, kind of thing. I always say, I don't like black coffee. I've learned to like it, kind of thing. I think it's great. Obviously, just the people being familiar with this word vegan now is wonderful. Whether they are vegan or not, they know it. They know someone who is. That's massive. It's become mainstream. The reason... Can I argue with the reasons it's become mainstream? I probably can't, because anybody that looks at plant-based living or vegan diet lifestyle is saving an animal, is helping the planet, is helping the environment. It would be kind of very, very, if you like, ungrateful of me for somebody who is coming from a generation at a time when no one was vegan, no one knew what the word vegan was, no one knew anything about it, to now suddenly get to a point where people do, and they're saying, they're not quite vegan enough for me, or they're not vegan for the right reasons. It's there and it's great. I just hope that it hasn't exploded too quickly, so it might implode in the same way and vanish.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important that although, the food and the kind of celebrities and the people out there, who are promoting vegan, or the influencers, that's great. But I think there's got to be room for the grassroots of veganism that constantly peddling a real message behind it. The core principles. Also, what I would like to see within the vegan movement, at the more influential level, if you like, is more people with disability, more women, certainly, more people of different ethnicity and probably religion. So I think it needs, and different age as well, because one lady came to me. She works with the vegan runners, and she can't run, but she goes out and she hands drinks out to the runners, and she said, "Oh, I'm just an old lady that can't." And I said, You're probably more effective influencing, because there's a whole generation there of people that you can influence that probably a 24-year-old good-looking young man can't. So I think the important thing is that veganism doesn't become a stamp. Person. It's got to be. It's all inclusive to all people of all generations on all continents. It's not just that person must be vegan. Rubber stamp it. We're everywhere, and we're doing all sorts of jobs. We're a whole eclectic mix of people rather than just one kind of stereotype. The people that tend to get the attention are of one set genre. So I would like to see more mix. But it's good. I mean, any way of getting the message out there, any shape or form, you've got to be glad for, because obviously a few years ago I was moaning and saying, I can't get the message out there. But now it's everywhere. So, it's good. But it's important that it's at a very, very pivotal stage, and that it's handled properly. The custody of this is very important, because I do believe that veganism is the first step if we want to saving the planet and moving forward. It's not the end step. It's not the solution entirely. It brings with it a lot of solutions. But we've got to move on from there then and look at... It buys us time. I think that if the whole planet went vegan now, it would buy us the time to make sensible decisions which would work for the future, rather than panic decisions. We're going to have cars that run on water, and we're going to have we need to do something that's very obvious now, to buy time to check back and say, how do we need to start behaving, acting, thinking, sharing? We need a whole different model for global society in order to sustain the planet for the future. Because, it is a fact, and it's probably a tired fact, but for people, we need a planet 3.5 times as big as the one we've got for everybody to live in the same standard we live in the West. So what we've got to realise is that we need to expect and accept having far less for people to have more.
So we can't do this interview without talking about the whole purpose behind the drive, which is your sanctuary. So do you want to tell people a bit about that?
Yeah, we started Sanctuary. It was always been a dream, as many activists dream, is to have a sanctuary. And people do write to me and ask, how do I get a sanctuary? And I don't think there's not like a leaflet I can give you. It's grabbing any and every opportunity you can and running with it. And that's what I did with Tower Hill Stables. It was a series of actually bad events that happened that actually pushed us over the edge. We could not any longer sustain the model. We were working with rescue, which was to actually put the larger animals, the horses, under the care of other people, while we went to work frantically morning, noon and night to pay for it. One of the horses had a bad accident, got impaled on a fence. We nearly lost him. And we realised that he'd had that accident because the guy who owned the yard had allowed people to go and shoot rabbits in his field. So Oscar was at the vet for 13 weeks, and during that time, we literally rallied every person in my family. My mum took out loads of mortgages, took loans from Marks and Spencer, and said she was having a kitchen done up, and gave us we got the sanctuary. And then we could start rescuing the animals that I really felt passionate about helping, that I hadn't been able to, pigs and cattle and sheep. And it's just grown and grown and grown from there. That's like 20 odd years ago, into we've now got 500 rescued animals, split among 6 sites. We've got 97 horses. I've got 42 cows, 130 pigs, almost 100 sheep, various birds, chickens, turkeys, geese, ducks, swans, peacocks, just about everything, any avian you can probably mention. Obviously, we've got dogs and cats. I don't rescue too many dogs and cats. I've only got 11, and I tend to have the kind of animal that nobody else wants. And I don't rehome. So very few people come to you and say, I want an elderly staffy, and I'd like it to be on a lot of medication, have behavioural problems, and ideally incontinent. That's not the kind of animal that people... So I tend to take in the last chances. It's a massive undertaking. We still put our own money into it and fund it a lot by our own money, but that is dwindling. The whole model that we were working to has changed in terms of promises that haven't been fulfilled. So we've had to rethink what we're doing. I get up, it's famous, I get up at 3:30 in the morning and I start work, and I finish work when the animals are seen to, and if the animals aren't done, I stay up all night if necessary. It's a hard ask, but when you go out there and you see them enjoying their life in a natural environment amongst their own kind, it's worth it.
Yeah, because I was going to say as well that I remember in Running for Good you were talking about sort of the shame and the moaning and suffering because of the privilege that you actually have and that we all have, and compared to, with the thought of the animals driving you on. So I was wondering if being in that sort of close proximity all the time, that physical contact, daily contact, keeps that sort of mental strength, it keeps it real.
It does keep it alive. Like people say, it must be amazing to be around. It is amazing to be around the animals, but it can actually work in a negative way as well, because you see absolutely the proof positive of what you're fighting for and what you're fighting against in front of you. So people are, constantly thinking, but a pig is just a piece of animal agricultural equipment. It isn't. It's a real life sentient being. So, for instance, one night, Sainsbury, that we get the donated fruit and veg from, rang me and said, we've had over an order of watermelons and bananas. If you can get over here, we've got a whole van load for you. So we drove over there, and we'd fed the pigs that day, but it was a hot evening, and I said, let's take them a treat. And I took these watermelons and bananas to the field, and I started putting them in for the pigs, and they were bombing up the fields, and I don't want a banana, I want a watermelon. And you could see the individualness of each animal, really, and the joy that they had. And then you start, always there's that cloud behind, and you're thinking, what is it like in the farms now? What is it like? Because it was hot. That was the first reaction on like, we've had these hot evenings. Can you imagine? We're moaning, that it's too hot to sleep. Can you imagine what it's like in a factory farming unit at this moment? It must be literally like a furnace on earth. It must be. I know that in the local factory chicken unit, they were digging animals out with diggers, digging the chickens out. They died. They suffocated in there. I know from when I joined the fire brigade, one of the jobs, because we were team firefighters, we used to go to, one guy had a chicken, not a massive chicken unit, but his sheds used to get hot in the hot weather, and we used to take the pump and put the ground monitor on the roofs to try and cool it down for the birds inside. It's just like unimaginable suffering. So yes. Do I ever feel proud? Yes, sometimes I do. I never really stop to look up. I enjoy the fact that the animals are there interacting with each other on their terms. I don't put myself on a pedestal to think that, and I wouldn't want them. Somebody asked me, what would you want the animals to say to you if they could speak? And it certainly wouldn't be thank you, because thank you is something for over and above what you deserve, if you like, for a present. I'm giving them what they deserve. I'm giving them back their rights. I should not be thanked for that. Everybody else should be berated for not feeling the same. So I do feel, there's a certain amount. Sometimes I look up and you might just a moment when the sun's on your face and one of the cows might run over to you and you think, this is heaven. It's heaven. My job to keep making it heaven for them. And much as I like to be amongst them, I love to be amongst them. I like to see them amongst each other. Because actually, I don't put myself on a pedestal to think that they need this human around them. It's my job to be around them and care for them and supervise them and make sure they have everything within as natural environment as I can possibly provide within the remits that I've got, which is obviously for the farmed animals, it's certain legal things that I have to do. But it can bring joy, but it can be very, very sorrowful, because much as it's great to see these animals liberated, your mind always travels back to the ones that aren't. And I'm probably is in the comparison with running. I don't think I've ever been happy with a race I've ever run. I've always thought, could have done a bit more, should have done a bit more, what if I'd have done this? And it's the same with the sanctuary. You're never going to feel, it's job done here. I'm pretty proud of what I'm done here. It's always, I'm looking at what I haven't done and thinking how I can address that. And I think that's what enables me to keep going. If there'd been a limit and I'd reached it, right, I've got a sanctuary now, great, I've done my job and I can sit back now. I don't want to sit back because I don't see enough people to fill my shoes with my particular message. I see it's great to influence and to tell people not to eat meat and dairy. I see that's great, but the people that are actually doing it my way and actually hands-on caring for the animals are so few and far between. I don't feel I have any right to just sit back and just enjoy what I've done. I want to keep pushing forward because actually the animals have so few friends on this earth.
Yeah.
True friends that are willing to go that extra length for them. And I'm one of them, so I want to use that to my best ability for as long as I'm here. And I don't know how long I'm going to be, nobody does, but I don't want to... I'm going to be a long time dead, so I want to make use of the time I'm alive in a positive way.
Definitely, yeah, because that's sort of what the driving of love is. In films, love is painted as, there's the thing, and then there's the happy ending, and it's all, but sort of true, real love is about being there through all of the horrible, sort of terrible and heartbreaking times.
And I think that's the message, actually, that could be translated to things. Bad things are terrible. And I always say to people with bad races or bad... You learn more from the bad ones than you do from the good ones. Yeah. If you go sailing out, I felt good today. But the bad ones, you have to dig and find other places to dig to and other ways of coming around them. And I think it's a little bit like when you... I used to listen to, say it's a tennis match and say, oh, this person's a champion, he'll find a way of winning. And you think, well, of course he will. He's got to knock ball back, but better than other bloke. But then you think, when you say find a way of winning, it's find a way of mentally overcoming what the problem is and finding a way around it. So you do learn more from the bad stuff than the good stuff, but obviously they're hard lessons to learn. But the important thing is, I'm not perfect, I'm not some vegan guru, but I do make mistakes, make loads of them, but I learn from them, and I acknowledge that fact. I know very little, which allows me to go and learn a lot more. I don't just sit there, I know it all, I'm perfect. I'm not, I'm far from. But I want to learn more, I want to continue learning. And, with that learning curve, it comes accepting your mistakes and admitting to them.
Definitely, yeah.